Welcome back to season one of Open Door Conversations. This is episode 12. Men need love too, and it is our biz. I am one of your hosts, Renata,
And I am your other host, Fatima.
and we are going to have what we are calling today a bonus two-part episode. This is part one of an unplanned content related podcast. That's a mouthful.
It is. Sometimes, as with this one, they are the best.
Yeah. So I figured we would jump into having this conversation, which is we're calling it a bonus episode because we really didn't plan this one. Like most content creators, I guess you listen, hear, watch different things. You're picking up, reading, whatever, at different points in time throughout the week, the day. And so we ran across this clip from, we're going to call her Miss Chanel. We don't want to maybe share all of her name for fear of, or concern, I should say, of any type of legal implications. So we just call her Miss Chanel. But she has wonderful content, and she had a conversation regarding, I guess, what do you want to call it, Tima? The science of emotional connection.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's the science of emotional connection.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is. It was a very interesting topic. She touched on a couple different things. I think the points she was really focusing on initially was the idea of women, spouses, wives, withholding sex from their husband. And let's preface this. This is not necessarily like, at least the clip that we saw was not necessarily about her telling people yes or no, right or wrong. It was her, it seemed like, to be answering somebody else's question to her. And essentially what she was saying was that some of the best advice she had heard in life regarding emotional connection or intimacy in marriage was to, number one, not to withhold sex from your husband, and two, have sex often. And so I guess we should probably preface this conversation with some explicit content, possibly. I don't really think we're going to get into a lot of the physical part of things. We just really want to talk about, as we discussed, I think, and coming into this convo, let's bring up the impact of emotional connection on relationship. I guess more so the science behind it and how that's challenged relationships, or how relationships are challenged within our community. And so that's kind of, I think, maybe the framework we want to come from, because I don't know, do I agree? I do agree, right? That we maybe, as married couples, husband, wife, whatever, withholding sex. Can I just say it? Yeah, because we real.
Yeah, yes, of course.
That's kind of petty. you know, like, just tell him what, give him a legit reason, But I also believe the framework in which we were coming from, why are people withholding it in the first place? Why are they withholding in the first place? And I think there's a lot when we talk about from a mental health framework, or emotional health, or psychological health, physical health, spiritual health. Like, there's so many things that contribute, I think, to why the withholding is happening in the first place. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. And I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I'm excited about having it.
I'm excited about having it too. And you're absolutely right. Don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to go and get into it. But one thing that you said that made me think is, why do we withhold it in the first place? Like you said, number one, petty. I mean, and I think to your point too, one thing that she said is as a punishment.
Right. And that's what I mean by petty, right?
And so with that, I think that, like, the reason that most women can so freely withhold it is because sex has a different meaning for men than it does for women. Like, for men, it's almost like they say they just gotta have it. Women are like, I'm good. You know, especially you done made me mad. I'm real good. We are really good because for us, we tend to think that the intimacy part of it is only for us as women. And we forget, or and I don't even want to say forget, may not even recognize the intimate level of it for men
Mm-hmm.
because we think that men, again, just it's just about the sex.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for me, and we can't speak for men. So, as a
Right.
surprise, we will be having another part two of this
Uh-huh.
with a special guest to follow up with us on this as a male, from a male perspective. But I think we tend to forget that intimacy that men need. And one of the things that she was speaking on in there is, just being so fulfilling and giving and freeing to your spouse during I don't even want to say the act, but during the intimacy of having sex. And one thing that she spoke on too
Mm-hmm.
was the levels of oxytocin that's released, when that, how high of a level men release it at. And this is my opinion, my
Mm-hmm.
perspective is that on the emotional connection, I would have to agree that
Mm-hmm.
for men, sex is sex. I believe it's the intimacy of it outside of the act of sex that makes it intimate for men. So it's the touching, it's the caressing, it's the kissing, it's those things that they did not receive growing up, basically, especially in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. So I guess in this framework, you make some really good points. Like, do you think that the reason that, you know, people in our community are challenged in this area, like what I guess the question I'm asking is, what are the things that are challenging that level of connection and intimacy in our community, like within relationships, or the relationships within our community? And that's like a tongue twister, and here's what I mean by that. Because I think one of the points that we kind of like, that I was wondering as we were kind of like, okay, what would we call this episode after hearing that clip? And one of the things that, I really, at least for me, honed in on was sometimes when we look at relationships outside our community, I've heard that, I've had conversation with other friends who are like, man, why does it sometimes seem so hard for Black couples or Black
Mhm.
relationships? Why does it seem like when we look outside our community, people seem more connected, more intimate? And I will be honest with you, I've had that conversation with people and I've said, seemingly, and what could be factors contributing to the challenge of intimacy within our culture? Because I believe, as she said, like withholding it as punishment, like who's doing that, right? Number one, biblically, I do believe I've read somewhere that, that's not really the healthiest thing to do. I'm just going to paraphrase and say the healthiest thing to do for the relationship and connection within the relationship to withhold, intimacy. And intimacy doesn't have to be the physical act of, sex. It could be hugging, caressing, anything like that. What are the things that really challenge people in our community?
So, and you probably saw my face changed, but of course our
Sure.
audience can't. But one of the things that struck me when you said the holding and the caressing, have you ever really paid attention or noticed the reaction of a Black man that gets a sincere hug or a sincere caress? Have you just noticed how it almost just melts them, like, oh my gosh, that tough exterior that they try to put up. It's just when they get it, it's just the biggest smile, and
Mm-hmm.
their eyes just light up when that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. That is so true. Why is that?
Again, I think, as you said, going back to the conversation that we were having before, even in other communities, but we're specifically speaking on ours, and we know it to be true, is grow up. You're not a boy. You're a man. Men don't cry.
Mm,
Boys don't cry.
mm,
Get off your mom. Don't go hugging on her. No, I
mm,
can't kiss you. You're a boy. The same type of nurturing, hugging, loving, kissing that women get, men don't get growing up.
mm,
Unless as a mother you intentionally make
mm,
sure that your child is going to have that.
mhm, mhm.
So I think that in getting that touch and getting those hugs and getting those caresses, it's reminding them that they are loved, just like with babies on that skin to skin contact.
Right.
It just does something to it, gives them life.
Mhm, mhm. Man,
And I think that that's what happens to our men when they receive that. It gives them life. So it's so far beyond the intimacy, the physical act of having sex. It's that caress, it's that kiss, it's that just that skin to skin contact and touch.
mhm, mhm. Wow, that's good. It takes me back to a point that she made when we talk about the oxytocin being released in the first place, and maybe people understanding that
Mm,
that hormone that's released is, scientifically is known as a bonding hormone. And she mentioned that in her clip. And I think for all the points you just made, like in answering that questions, like, well, why? And when you think about, to your point, all the messages in our society that
mm,
limit emotional connection to men, or young boys when they're growing up, somebody's like, oh, don't cry, like I remember watching some clip where a basketball player, I won't shout him out for fear that people may, find his response to be negative, but some young boy was like waiting for him and he like autographed or he jumped into his photo. And when the young boy was like, of course, taken aback by the fact that this, huge basketball celebrity like photo bombed his selfie or whatever. And the athlete's response to him was like, don't let them see you cry. And I thought to
mm,
myself, ooh, if I could DM him as a therapist and tell him, you quit pushing that nonsense. That's the reason why so
mm,
many of our men struggle. Now, this young boy didn't look like us, but nonetheless, a lot of men hear
mhm.
that, and some people would talk around my son and may say, "Oh, I'm like, nope, let him cry. Oh, let him feel. Let him have his feeling. Let him have his moment." Because I don't ever want him growing up thinking that it's not okay for him to feel. I'm quick to
Yes,
tell people, we call those people psychopaths, and he is not, and most of you are not. But there's
exactly.
so many messages, I think, to your point, that have hit our community in some instances, possibly for good reason, for protection, and
Mm,
but how long do they continue to push those messages because they're really not helpful? We get into relationships. Number one, they're taught not to, and we're taught to be disgusted by any man that emotes. How terrible is that? And we wonder, I guess, now bring that full circle, why, we talk about the challenge of emotional connection and intimacy in our relationships within the Black community.
mm. Wow.
We said we didn't know
Now
where this was going.
now the way that you just brought all of that back together, that is amazing. That now those 2 points of where they're taught not to show emotions, where we're taught not to respect a man that
Mhm,
shows emotion.
mhm.
Where do we, like you said, where do we go? And then we continue to then foster that into our kids, and then they foster that into our kids, and then we look at where's our community at, and
Yeah,
here we are.
here we are. Wow. A different spinoff from the original topic that we heard, but I think that's so important. Wow. Hmm. Before we dive in a little bit further, let's take a quick break so that we can hear from our sponsors. And we'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by Ebony Ascent. Be sure to check out all of our content on ebonyascent.com. Ebony Ascent, the spectrum of what's possible.
Welcome back. This is part 1 of a 2-part series that we are doing called Men Need Love Too. And yes, it is our biz. So we are picking back up where we were just talking about understanding how the messages in our community have really maybe sort of taught men to not feel or emote or share or maybe feel or have an emotional connection with people or their partners, or to show emotion, and how, sometimes as, Black women, we've been taught, oh, if he does show any emotion, he's not a real man. That's one of the most hurtful things I think I've heard, women say about young men. Why does he cry? And I'm thinking to myself, what makes him different? And then
What
we
makes
wonder
him
why.
different?
Right. And we wonder why we struggle in our relationships.
Or he's not emotionally available to me. Have you ever allowed him to be emotionally available to you? Have you ever allowed him to be emotional, period? Have you given him the safe space to know that, you know what? She's going to hold me down. She's going to rub my back. She's going to hold my hand. She's going to let me know it's going to be okay. The
Yeah.
same things that we want
Mhm.
is the same things that they desire.
True.
But again, because of society, they don't know how to put that into words.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's easier if I go hang out with my boys, talk to my boys. Okay, well, we talk and they might give me a little bit of good advice, but none of us can relate because none of us know how to emote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so again, we just continue to raise our children that way, and it becomes this huge thing in our community. And how do we come together as couples? How do we come together as a community
Mm-hmm.
to change how we see each other?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right now, let's forget about how the world sees us,
True.
because the world is going to see us the way that they see us. But we can't change the way that they see us until we change how we see each other.
Oh, I so agree.
And that starts with our family, our foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And until the Black family comes back together and supports each other,
Mm-hmm.
we won't be able to do it in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so true. Wow, that's powerful. That is really, really powerful. I think to your point, you said coming back together and like how do we do that? And I think one of the things that I would want people to know, especially as a therapist, because you don't, sometimes people talk about what they talk about in therapy and sometimes they don't. And I will tell you that there are not a lot of male therapists. So most likely, if your husband is going to therapy, he's going to see a woman counselor, because there's not a lot of male counselors yet. I think that's changing, and I think for the better too. One thing I will tell you, just so y'all know, because if he doesn't disclose, that oftentimes the bulk of the first maybe few weeks or months is just him getting used to talking about how he feels. He just needs a space created that's safe, where he doesn't feel judged. He doesn't feel like he has to watch what he's saying. He's not having to stumble over his words. And I will tell you, as a Black female therapist that works with Black men, it is tough. Like, I don't know that I do as much work sometimes as I do with our brothers. I'm telling you, because a lot of the first maybe few months is really debunking so much of what they've heard about them not being able to share who they are and how they feel. And so I can't speak for every therapist, but I will tell you a good chunk of them are probably just working with him on learning how to express how he feels, and that it's okay for him to do that. What that sometimes is being on the opposite side is it's not fully received when he comes back home and he's starting to share how he feels. And when we talk about it's your biz, it is your biz. Because if you want a healthy, loving, thriving, connected, emotionally related relationship that you see outside of our community or we see on TV, or maybe you don't even know what that is. But I'll tell you what comes out of that is healthy kids.
That part.
Kids who have identity. Here's one, a marriage that's successful. And I won't sit here and say that mine has been peaches and cream at all. But one thing I'm starting to learn and have learned is that men need the space to be. They need the space to be able to share their emotions and how they feel. And if we're still holding on to old messaging that he's weak or he's, some negative description, or he acts like a woman or whatever negative, why is he always crying? Whatever has been said about any African American male or male of color about how he feels and when he's expressed, or you see a teardrop from his eyes. Can I just be real? Y'all stop that.
Please and thank you. You made some very great points, and listening to you, so I do a check-in with my husband. And sometimes it's just, you good? When I know something has gone on, or I could tell that he's frustrated, it's just are you good? Or something that all of us do together is, you need a hug, because you see that, you feel it. Or it's just like, he'll just stand there, he'll be like, bring it in. Or I'll just tell him, because you see it, if you are in tune. And again, let me just back up to your point. I will in no way, shape, or form, and I don't think anyone can ever say that their marriage, number one, is perfect,
right,
or that they have not had troubles. But it's what you're doing in the midst of that. And so even in the midst of that, I'm still in tune to my husband, and he's still in tune to me and my emotions. And he knows when I'm going through, I know when he's going. Because of his past, it took a lot for him to begin to receive the love and the emotions that I was giving to him. He didn't know how to reciprocate that. Because previously, prior to me, it was, to your point, it was looked at as being weak. It was looked at as being not a man. So, I had to work around all of that shell that he put up. Why? Again, because of the things that other women had put on him, because they're used to men, as my mother and grandmother would say, men beating them upside the head, cussing them out from this way to Sunday. That made that person a man. No, that's made you less of a man to resort to that when it comes to anyone, especially a female, and a female that's within your life circle. And so, as you said, we have to, those images, or those false images of Black men, we have to remove that. But just as the Black man has to remove those false images that they have of Black women, that we're loud, that we're angry, that we're ghetto, that we're messy, that we're this, we again have to go back to loving and respecting each other. And emotions is a difficult thing.
Sure is.
And one thing you said that made me laugh when you were speaking about counseling Black men is, when I promise you, when I had my first client that was a Black male, out of all the clients that I've ever had, that was the one I was most concerned about. Because I wanted to be sure that I gave him what he needed. And making sure that he was heard, that he was understood, that he was not coming. I was not judging him as the world judges him,
Right,
as the female that he was with judges him. I am just here for you to give you that safe space, as you said, so to find yourself and value yourself. And I think that that's something that is so critically important, is giving them that space to just be.
Yeah. That is the power of emotional connection, is emotional safety, which is the space you're talking about. And I truly believe that if couples are able to get beyond the things that I would say history, the things that they come into the relationship with,
Ooh.
the challenges, the lies, the messaging, and all that stuff, and they can bring that to the forefront. That's why I think couples therapy is so powerful. And
Yes.
one of the number one things that I focus on is foundation. And I remember I
Mm.
had a young couple who, bless their heart, they were not part of our community, but they came in and they were like, well, I just don't understand. We've been on the foundation and I just feel like we're on this and that. And I said, but you're in my office, and you're in my office because of infidelity. So that already tells me
Mm.
that there's an issue with foundation. And you're talking about there's no connection. And I'm hearing the way that and of course, I'm not telling them this to this degree, but I'm saying that what you've gone through in your past, if you don't deal with those things, they're coming into your relationship. Women, if you don't deal with how you were treated before you, right? Whether that was another man or that was your dad or it was a lack thereof, you're bringing that into your relationship, into your marriage. And that's going to be how you engage with your spouse. Even since this episode is about men and we're saying you need love too, guess what? If you didn't get that from mom, from dad, grandparents, and you come in with a deficit in emotional connection, guess what? You bringing that into your marriage. And your wife and
Mm.
your children are going to experience that. And the same thing for women. Your husband and your children are going to experience that. That's why it's so important I tell people, deal with your knapsack before you come, before if you can, before you get married. And if you haven't, you can still deal with your knapsack, but give grace to one another while we start to unpack the things that could be hindering emotional connection.
That's huge. And you know what's so interesting is now emotional connection. Now this might be turned into a 2, 3, 4 part series because that's so valid and valuable what you just said. Like the understanding that yes, no matter how much we unpack, marriage is two people, two, as they say, two imperfect people coming together.
Yep.
And you speak on this a lot about accountability for that knapsack.
Yeah. Yep.
Accountability for I know what's wrong with me. I
Mhm.
know what issues I got. I know what I need to work on.
Mhm.
And so I just it's not fair for me to bring it in and put it on the next person and say that it's because of them. When
Right.
I know I had these issues years and years and years ago.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the things that we and yes, this will be a series. And I say that because as a community, we have to get to the root of why we cannot trust each other
Mm.
emotionally, why we can't support each other emotionally, and why we can't provide that safe space to each other, to our spouses, as well as to our friends.
Mhm.
And a lot of that has to do with because we're not even emotionally stable.
Mm. Right. I agree. I definitely agree with the whole series, and I think for each one of those points that you just made, because there are so many things that I'm going to say attack that emotional connection. And essentially, to the point you made, is like it what impedes our progress in that area oftentimes are the traumas that we come into relationship with, or the messages, the beliefs that we have about who we are or about one another, about relationships as a whole. I tell people and I'm not, mama, if you listen to this ain't about you. Because I know she will. But I'll just say one of the things that I heard, not necessarily from her, but in circles, black men ain't no good, or they all dogs. And I thought to myself, now hold on. I can't really speak about my dad because I didn't see that part of him when I was growing up. I don't know. Sorry if y'all all saw that. I didn't see that. Uh, I can say that about my grandfather because he was like, if it was a disciple in this day and age, Grandpa Charles would have been a disciple of Jesus. At least that was my humble opinion. And he just did not operate like that. He was the sweetest man to the day he died, standing right there next to him as he was leaving this earth. I did not see that from him. So I was like, I could, as a child, as a woman, as a young girl, I should say, I couldn't rationalize that being true about all men, especially all Black men, because I saw a few, right? And then
Right.
enter the military, all men cheat on their wife. I deployed with Black men who didn't cheat on their wives. Some did, but there was a good chunk of them who didn't. There was a
Who
good
didn't?
chunk of the young ones in my early 20s who were already married and they chose not to. They hung around people that held them accountable, right? Some people would be like, oh, what? Nope. But they hung around. They was like, I'm not going to do that to my spouse or to my family. So I couldn't say that all Black men were dogs because that wasn't my
Right.
experience. But that message permeates in our community still to this day. We see stuff posted online of, things like, the lady put herself out there when she posted the young man who didn't bring the food to all the kids, and everybody had a conversation about that. Now, if you had an issue with how he handled that, there was no reason, this is just my humble opinion, to handle that type of disagreement and post that for the world to see. And we wonder why Black people act like they do. I'm not justifying it because guess what? Even within yourself, I'm going to tell you, swallow pride and you go higher. But we
Okay,
wonder,
Michelle.
right? Go higher. Right. She said it. Go higher, Miss Michelle Obama. But we wonder why it's a struggle for them to be vulnerable. What if that man didn't have the money to buy all them kids? Maybe he shouldn't have bought nothing, but maybe there was a conversation between him and his baby boy about something. We don't know. Maybe
Right.
he wasn't trying to be petty. Even if he was, you go high and you have a conversation with him. This kind of stuff in our community is a thing I would absolutely love to see change. Is how we operate in that emotional safe space. How do we allow vulnerability? And I know so much of what we've seen and what we heard wasn't really maybe the best example, but there's way too many books. There's way too many content creators. Here's one. You got a whole Bible. That's what I tell my couples, especially the Christian ones. You got a whole Bible that's telling you how to treat one another. Me and the kids always joke, who is your neighbor? And they'll laugh, oh, that's Samaritan. I'm like, it's everybody. Your neighbor is your spouse. Quit dogging them out on social media. And here's one, God forbid, because I know sometimes I've probably been guilty of this too, to your family. Go talk to Jesus who ain't no gossiper and tell him get some wisdom and come on back and handle it the right way.
And see, now that is the important part right there, like you said, especially to your family. See, the thing with me, and you know this as a fact to be true, I am not going to talk to nobody that then came back to me about somebody.
That's true. That's true, people.
My circle is about as big as a pin top. Because I know the people that are going to pray for us, pray with us, and not talk about us and teach me from their experience. See, when you run into family and those other type of friends, that's when you get all that trouble inside your marriage. That's when you get all that trouble inside your home.
True.
Because see, they already got trouble. They already got issues. So what they are counseling, air quotes, you on is from the issues in their marriage. It's
Mm,
from the trouble that they have in their family.
mhm.
So now I'm going to give you what I do, what we do, how we operate over here. And it don't fit for your household.
Right. Right.
But you bring that back to your household. Now y'all got issues
Hmm.
bigger than what you had.
Right. And you just had to talk to your husband.
And you just had to talk to your husband or to your confidant. So she said, so she could tell you, get your stuff together
Right. Sit down somewhere.
and go on and talk to your husband.
Right. How about you go to your closet, go to your secret place, tell God about it first. If he tell you it's okay to talk to me, let's chat. I'm gonna take you back to go back to your closet.
But that is so true what you said about always hearing that black men are dogs, black men are no good. I'll tell anybody till the day God calls me home. I love me a black man like
Mhm.
no other. Like,
Yeah,
and they deserve,
they
just
do.
as we say women, black women deserve to be protected, black men deserve to be protected.
I agree.
And so often they don't do that with us as women anymore because they don't feel protected by us. And I don't mean in a physical sense. I mean
Mhm.
in an emotional sense, in a spiritual sense, in a loving sense. If
Mhm.
a black man felt that a black woman truly cared and loved him, oh, he's going to protect them out in the street.
Uh-oh.
But at the same time, why am I gonna put my life on the line because she's just gonna go back to him, or she just gonna keep doing that, or she don't really care because look how she's handling herself. So I guarantee you, almost like they do the experiment of the black and white child. If you were
Mhm.
to ask a black man, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but the loud, stereotypical black woman that they put out there were to see her in the street, and then the more conservative corporate type dressed black female, both of them were having the argument or in some type of altercation with someone. Which one would they go to first?
Mhm. Mhm.
And of
Mm.
course they're going to go to the more conservative one because that one over there, she's just going to keep doing that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we've got to value ourselves as women and how we put ourselves out there and represent ourselves. I don't care what society is showing. I've never
Right.
cared. I've never cared what they are showing out there. And we've got to not care what they're showing out there. And if I call myself a queen, I call my sister a queen, I've got to represent one.
Hello.
And if I call that black man a king, I've got to represent him as a black queen. So
Right.
that whether I know him or not, but so that not everybody looking at me, see, she's just like the rest of them. You
Right.
know, we can't even give a head nod.
Mhm.
Like, really? Oh,
Right.
there's just, yes, this is a,
Oh, this is about 8 parts. Like this hit me with about 4 or 5 more points. I'm like, Lord have mercy on us. Wow. You gave us about 5 more topics. I'm not kidding. Maybe spinoffs. I don't know. But
not
wow,
the spin-off.
accountability.
Mm,
Like what's the saying? Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you
mm,
are. I love that. Like, yes, why is that not the heart posture of our
yes.
people? That I want to represent well.
Mm,
Me first, the kingdom of God,
yes.
and I want to represent my spouse well. These people didn't look like us, but we were at the airport coming back, from visiting family, and were we going or no? We were going, and of course, people. My kids are like magnets, like little people, older people. Just see them and they just want to talk to them. So here's it comes this little boy, and he's about my youngest age, and they're kind of, swinging on the ropes. They're not really bothering anybody. But the boy's mom and dad are there, and they have another baby, like a baby. And the dad is there and trying to, gather something, or he's asking about like, oh, do you have the milk? Because the baby's starting to cry and whatever. And as it is when you have two small kids under 5 and that exchange or whatever, the lady degrades this man in front of everybody.
Mm.
And I just look at him and he don't say anything. And I'm just like, how often do the men in our community experience stuff like that? And here's one. This is why I was like, while you were talking. How often do our young boys experience that from their mothers?
Yes.
Girl,
Now,
bring
that's my heart right there.
Oh, my heart too. Because listen, in another life, we would have probably been sisters. Like blood,
Indeed.
we are blood related. That's what we
Indeed. We was bought by the blood and we
That's
is
it.
blood related.
We blood related. But
Ooh.
listen, I thought about that and I was like, how many of our men experience that? And how many young boys experience that from their mothers, which impacts how they show up or not in relationships?
So with what you just said, continues the cycle. And I say that because oftentimes, you know how they say most women will marry someone like their dad.
Mm-hmm.
Most men end up marrying someone like their mother.
Mm.
And that in turn creates the woman that degraded him as he was growing up as a little boy. That's the one that's always cursing him out. That's the one that is always telling him he ain't no good. That's the one, and so that's where that come from. Because when you look at it, sometimes, we think, yeah, most women end up marrying someone like their father, but that's dependent upon the relationship they had with their father. In the single households, it's going to be the woman. It's going to be the mother. And again, what have we as mothers done to our sons?
Right. And that's a tough pill to swallow because some people don't want to look at how they've engaged, how their behavior has created lack of emotional connection, right? Or secure attachment, as we call it clinical, right? They don't want to see that. And that's what we said at the very beginning. Is what we say was called
Men need love too.
And it is your biz.
And with what you just said, because we as women, because I'm the mother, I didn't do nothing wrong. I stayed with the child. I had to raise these kids. So that means that the man ain't nothing. You ain't nothing because your dad wasn't nothing. You ain't nothing because your dad wasn't here. No, they're not nothing because you kept telling them they weren't nothing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, what did you as a mother do to your son?
Right. And not realizing that, not that he can't get help or he won't get help, because he will, but sometimes that interaction that he's first had with, someone who's supposed to be a secure connection to him, he didn't get the nurturing and whatever else, right? So they learn that, and then we go back to what this young lady said, kind of circle back, this bonding hormone, and you get with somebody, and we wonder why the physical act of intimacy is the thing that they gravitate toward, or they think about, is because that's what they equate to connection. That's what they equate to love. And so a lot of women, I think, struggle with that, because you hear stuff like, "Oh, I'm just a piece of meat," and it's like, well, me behavior. I'm like, well, what's the function of that? What's the function of that? Like, why is that there? Why is that present? Why is he acting like that? Why are you withholding? Why, like, what is that? Let's get to the root of why either of you,
yes,
Why are you withholding? If that's what the case is, maybe why is he withholding, or why does it feel like that? Why is there that level of disconnection in your relationship, or the lack of bonding, that sex is the only thing that's producing this bonding hormone seemingly?
Mm.
If we can weed out all those things or uproot them and deal with them, the power of intimate touch could come in. The power of intimacy is beyond physical touch. It's the way that we support each other. It's how we edify each other with our words. It's how we seek to do what's best for one another. I think one of the best pieces of advice that we got, we were going down to Southern California, like we stopped off in like Pismo Beach, and the kids were just bopping around the table, and there was this lady, she was sitting by herself, and she, I think, kind of people watching, and she said, I think, of course, my little evangelist asked her if she knew Jesus and if Jesus was a friend, and that's what opened the door to conversation. And so, as she watched us, she said, one of the things that I've learned, if I could offer this to your family, didn't know us from Adam. She just said,
Mm.
if you always care about the other person's needs and you work to fulfill them, you don't ever have to worry about your needs not being met.
Mm.
And I walked, listen, kind of the kids as we got up from dinner. She told some other wonderful things, but excuse me, I walked, and as I sat in the car, I just thought about that. My husband was like, "You still thinking about that, huh?" And I was like, "Yes." I said, "Do you know how powerful that is?" So many times we are looking for emotional connection. And yes, the physical act of intercourse may release this hormone, but I got to believe that hormone is rapid fire when beyond the physical part, there's that level of emotional connection in the relationship. And that's built from both people seeking the best for one another and supporting and speaking well too about one another and sharing and creating space for each of you to grow, and if you make mistakes and come back and that type of thing.
Mm.
I think that there's such richness in that, in helping to enhance, maybe. And I'm not saying there's science about that yet, no, maybe not, but I'll tell you, I have definitely seen that work in my favor, that when those things are in operation, the physical connection is deeper, because
Absolutely.
the emotional connection, that piece is there.
I think I really don't have too much more to say, because on that part, when understanding that when that emotional connection is so strong, like
Mhm.
you said, that intimate part is like a rapid fire, because
Mhm.
that the intimacy started way before the
Mhm.
actual act. And it's almost like, to the point that you made, it's almost like you could be, as they say, you could be in a crowded room, but without even seeing them, your spouse is in that room.
Mhm.
When they've entered into a room
Mhm.
without even having seen them come into the room. You just feel their presence because
Mhm.
of the connection that you have. Or you can feel them looking at you in that room
Mhm.
just because of the connection that you have. But it's a lot of work to get there.
Right.
And two people have to be willing to put in the work to get to that point.
Right. You got to be willing to put in work. Wow.
And that's going to always be our go-to. You got to be willing to put in the work.
You got to be willing to put in the work, and that right there, I think, for a lot of people is what hangs them up, because a lot of people ain't
Mm.
willing to put in the work. They are not willing to put in the work, and it shows.
And if just with this, again, like we said, this will become a series, but if we just really think about it, we say it so often, everyone says it so often, but if we would just think about how powerful of a community we could be when we strengthen our Black family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't have too much more to say outside of that because that's golden. That's golden. That is absolutely golden. Well, this was good. I'm excited about having a guest around this topic, and we can get a male perspective. We'll just throw a trailer
Yes.
out there, a male perspective on this topic, and really be able to have conversation with someone of the opposite sex to give insight into some of the things that we've shared so that we can hear from a male perspective. Like, I'm really excited about that. This was a good conversation though. I'm glad we had it.
I'm glad that we had it too. It was a good conversation, and I am excited about the guest as well. And I think, we're going to develop this as we go because we might just end up doing roundtables,
Yeah.
multiple guests,
Hello.
because I think that it's really needed as we focus on the mental healing and mental wellness of our community. We have to focus on healing and helping each other, loving each other, trusting each other, providing that safe space to be able to heal, to be able to acknowledge my past and move into my future. And we need to hear that from different aspects so that our audience can hear it from different views as well.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. We hope that something was said that touched your heart and changed your mind. And we definitely look forward to having you back again for the next episode. One resource that I want to share, and it'll be down in the show notes, is a book called Created for Connection. It is a biblical view, and Created for Connection really kind of stems from EFT, which is emotionally focused therapy. But this particular book, Sue Johnson, she is like the guru for and founder, creator, if you will, of emotionally focused therapy. And she has some other resources and tools that we'll try to link in the show notes. But most certainly from a biblical worldview, the book Created for Connection, which you can find on Amazon, probably all the other online platforms, is a really good book to kind of talk about connection within a relationship. And so, as always, you need help, find a therapist in your local area. While we are clinicians, this is just a resource tool. This is not meant to ever take the place of you actually sitting with someone, whether in person or via telehealth, because a lot of states offer that, allow for that now. So we definitely, have resources to in the show notes to kind of link people to places where you can go and get therapy, couples therapy, individual therapy. And we just hope that this could be one of those resources too. Well, thanks for listening.
Yes, thanks for listening.
If you want to follow us on social media, please do so on Instagram or Facebook at Open Door Combo. And if you'd like to send us an email or have questions or want to provide some follow-up to this conversation or any others, you can email us at opendoorcombo@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
And until next